Welcome back. It's Dr. T. Medley with Psychology 2301 General Psych information for our next chapter, which we are now up to learning, the process of learning concepts. So this lesson will introduce you to some very important concepts of learning, things like classical and operant conditioning, and even social learning theory. Now, how many of you have heard the really old saying, you can't teach a dog new tricks, right? Many of us have heard that before. And the question is, well, what does that mean? And why can't you teach an old dog new tricks? In many situations, that's not true, but it all depends on the specifics of the situation that you're talking about. In some ways, the learning chapter should convince you otherwise, that yeah, you can teach a dog of any age, technically, no ageism here, new tricks if you effectively apply learning concepts, right? Effective learning concepts or tried and true learning concepts. So each learning concept that is discussed in the chapter has a distinctly different way of impacting our behavior. Classical conditioning, which is one, involves the learning of a behavior that was initially an automatic process. All right, so you're taking an automatic process and integrating it or changing it, transitioning it to a learned behavior. You can kind of compare that to operant conditioning, which involves the learning of behavior with the use of antecedents and consequences, right? So what happens before and then what happens after a behavior. So the application of reinforcers or punishers can affect the likelihood that a particular behavior is repeated at some future point. And then you have social learning theory, which involves learning with the help of social engagement or interaction. So models whose behaviors are imitated in some way. And here we're not talking about runway models, but just people in your life that you might be exposed to who are modeling behavior for you. Now, each learning technique works best in certain situations or contexts, or may not work in other situations or contexts, but they are all important to the adaptation of new behaviors, right? And are important for specific situations. You'll want to make sure that you review each of the different learning techniques very thoroughly so that you don't confuse them with each other. Also, though, you want to make sure that you don't confuse behavioral learning, which is what this chapter talks about, with the learning of information or knowledge building, which is what you're doing in this class. So they're similar, but a little bit different. All right, so this chapter specifically talks about learning behaviors and why people engage in certain actions. We'll talk about cognitive processes and knowledge building in another chapter. So just hold on because we'll be getting to that pretty soon. All right, as always, send me an email or post a message to the discussion board if you have additional questions or need additional clarification. And I'll see you soon in an upcoming chapter.